Today's lesson is on increasing, decreasing, and constant functions, along with minima, maxima, and relative versus global extrema. Okay. So what are my learning goals today? I can determine characteristics of functions by stating the intervals for increasing, decreasing, and constant. I can determine the minimum, maximum location, and value by naming the location with the x-coordinate and the value with the y-coordinate. I can classify extrema as relative or global by deciding if the extrema are a minimum maximum of the function in the interval stated, which is relative, or the overall minimum maximum of the function, which is the global. Okay, so let's just take a minute right now and think about where we are in the learning curve here. I want you to think about if you've ever heard of this before or not. So I'm starting out at the novice level, going up to apprentice, practitioner, or expert. So where do you fit in the spectrum? I want you to think about that before we get started and then at the end of the lesson. Okay, so the location is where. And where is determined by the x-coordinate. And the value is the what, how much, the magnitude, and this is the y-coordinate. Okay, so let's take a minute here and let's take a look at this function. And we have a section here that is decreasing. So we want to name where we are decreasing. So I name by the x locations. So I'm coming down here and my x value is at -2. And I am ending at what would be 0. And I'm including -2, so that would be a bracket because the circle is filled in. And while I have a filled in circle here for 0, I also begin the next description called constant, and I can't be decreasing and constant, so that would be a parenthesis. So my next section here is constant. So constant is this section here. So I want to know, where do I begin and end? So I'm beginning at 0. I'm ending at 2. And since I'm also attached to other descriptions, I don't include 0 and I don't include 2, so I use parentheses. So the last section of my function here is my increasing. So to describe where it is, I come and look at the x intervals. So I begin at 2 and I end at 4. Since 2 cannot be constant and increasing, I use a parentheses. And 4 only has one type and it's filled in, so I can use a bracket there. So just taking a moment to think when I'm describing intervals, how is that similar to what we already know about slope? So I know that increasing is similar to a positive slope. It looks like this. Decreasing look like a negative slope. And a constant slope, which is a 0 slope. Looks like a horizontal line. So describing my intervals is very similar to what I already know about slope. Okay, so if this was our calculator and we're looking at example of this function, f of x equals x cubed, Where would we describe increasing, decreasing, and constant? So this is our parent function that is cubic. And if I really look at it, I'm increasing. So I start out at negative, the x value, this is considered having an arrow here, which means I want to know where did I begin on the x, which is at negative infinity. And this has an arrow, so I'm ending on x here, which is positive infinity. And anytime I'm referencing infinity, I'm always using parentheses. So I don't have anything that is decreasing, and I don't have anything that's constant. If you looked in the table right here where I'm switching concavity, you'll notice I am always, the y value to the right is always greater than to the left. So I know I'm increasing if I just go and look at the table. All right, so let's try the next examples. Let's take a look here and let's define where I'm increasing, decreasing, and constant. So I'm going to just go from left to right on my graph. So if I start on the left, I am increasing here. This is also increasing. So let's name where I'm increasing. So I want to name, I'm going to come up here. So where did I start? So here is -1, -2, -3, -4, but this is really infinity, right? So all the way over here is really negative infinity. So I'm beginning at negative infinity. And then I'm ending here. And my x value is -1. And I know I'm in a decreasing section, so I cannot include -1. So my interval is from negative infinity to -1. I also see that I'm increasing in this section here. So I'm beginning here at 1. And I am ending, this is an arrow, so I'm really ending at infinity. Okay, so my next section here, I'm decreasing. So I'm decreasing from here to here. So my x value starting here is at -1. And I can't be part of increasing and decreasing, so I don't include it, so that's a parentheses. And then I'm ending here at the x value of 1. And I don't have any constant values. I don't have to have all of them in 1. So instead of leaving it blank to tell me that you know there are no constant values, you would state none. All right, so I want you to try the next one. So pause the video and then tell me what's increasing, decreasing, and constant. Okay, let's check. How did you do? So this section here would be increasing. So I'm starting over here. This has got an arrow on it. So I know that's really, I'm beginning at negative infinity. And I'm ending at, what's my, at this location here. I want to know what is x. So x is 0. So my next section is constant. So I'm starting at 0. I can't be both increasing and constant, so I don't include 0. That's a parentheses. And then I'm going to end at the x value of 2. And I'm not going to include 2 because 2 cannot be both constant and decreasing. So my final section of my graph is decreasing. I'm starting at 2. I'm not going to include 2 because I can't be constant and decreasing. So I use a parentheses. And this is an arrow on the end. So I'm ending at infinity. And infinity always has a parentheses. So let's try the next one. I have a few more things going on in here. So to start out with, I'm going to go left to right. This section is increasing, and so is this section. So while it's increasing at a different rate, I'm still just defining the interval of increasing and decreasing, so I can call it as one section. So my x value that I'm starting at here is 0. I have a filled in circle, so I can include that, so it's a bracket. And then I'm ending at 10. I can't be constant and increasing, so I'm not going to include 10. Well, my next section is constant, so I'm starting at 10. Oops. So I'm starting at 10, and I am ending at 20. And I'm not including 10 or 20, so I'm using parentheses. Next, I am decreasing. So I am starting at 20, not including 20, so parentheses, and ending at 30, not including 30, so that's another parentheses. Next section, I am constant again, so I'm starting at 30, not including it, parentheses, ending at 40, not including 40, parentheses, increasing again, so this section, so I'm going from 40, not including it, to 45, not including it, so parentheses again, constant, so constant from 45 to 50, not including 45, not including 50, and then my last section is increasing again. So I'm starting at 50 and going all the way to 60, and this time I can include 60 but not 50, and I show that with a bracket. Okay, so that concludes the increasing, decreasing, and constant portion. So now we're going to talk about extrema. So just some of the vocabulary, if I have more than one minimum, I call that a minima. If I have more than one maximum, I call that a maxima. And when I include multiple minima and multiple maxima, I call that extrema. Okay, so extrema is the plural of minima and maxima. Okay. Okay, so when I'm taking a look here, if I'm just looking at a section of my graph, I can see that these 2 points down here are minimas. So when I come in where I am decreasing and then I change to increasing, I have a minimum. So I started going down with a decreasing and then I go back up with an increasing, I have a minimum. And then when I go in with an increasing and switch to a decreasing, I have a maximum. So if I'm just looking at a little section at a time, I call those relative minima or maxima. So over here, this one would be the highest of the 2 maximas, so I would call this the global maxima. It's hard to tell whether I have a global, but it looks like this one is a little bit lower than the one to the right. So this would be the global. So it is the lowest of all the minima. So this is the lowest. This would be the highest. So global is the most extreme. Okay, so we are going to be using a calculator. And if you do not have a TI calculator, an app on your phone would work. So you could either use Calculate 84, works really good on an iPhone, or Wabbit on an Android. So we're going to be using a graphing utility or a calculator and typing in this equation. We're going to round to hundredths. And I want to name a relative maxima and a minima. I want to know what the coordinates are and where it is and what's the value. So if I type this in, what I see is I have a relative minimum and the coordinates at the relative minimum are 0.67 and minus 3.33. So the where is at the x coordinate, so that's at x equals 0.67. And the value of the minimum is the y value, so that is y equals minus 3.33. And if I don't remember how to find the minimum or the maximum, this is where on the calculator you do second, trace, then you're choosing minimum or maximum, and then you're doing left enter, right enter, guess, or enter, 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 okay? So left, enter, right, enter, and guess. So I need to have the minimum or the maximum between the two arrows to know, for the calculator to know which one I am doing. So I want to be to the left, to the right, and enter. Okay, so you tell me this one, do the same thing. I just pause the video. When you're done, start the video up again. So what we find out with this equation, that I have a maximum and the coordinates are minus 0.88 and 5.06. So my x, where is it at the x value? So minus 0.88. What is the maximum? The maximum is at the y value, which is 5.06. And again, I'm getting that by, I'm going to graph and I'm doing second trace, minimum or maximum based on what I'm looking at. I'm going to the left of it. I'm sliding over to the right, and then I'm hitting enter. Okay, let's do one last example. Okay, this one, we are going to adjust the window size. So when I reset my calculator, the standard window that I have is minus 10 to plus 10 in the X and the Y direction. So for us to be able to see a little bit closer what we want to see, let's change the parameters on the windows and we'll be able to see what we have a little bit better. So sketching out what we see is it actually kind of looks like this. Okay. And I have a minimum and a maximum. And at my minimum, I get a minus 0.58 and a minus 0.38 and a plus 0.58 and a plus 0.38. So here I have a minimum, here I have a maximum. So my maximum has the coordinate 0.58, 0.38. So where is it? It's at x equals 0.58. What is the maximum? Y equals 0.38. And my minimum is minus 0.58 minus 0.38. My location is at x equals minus 0.58, and the magnitude of my minimum is y equals minus 0.38. Okay, that's the end of the lesson.